Please make sure to like this video and subscribe. Hey everyone, it's JR here again at Holy Faith Media. I wanted to come on tonight and talk about something that made me really stop and think when I was growing up as a Protestant. One of the first things that really shook my faith or made me start to really question some of the beliefs that I was taught as a Protestant happened when I was about 14 years old. And I remember when I was 13 years old, I was baptized as a Seventh-day Adventist. So some of you may be familiar with that sect. Some of you may not have any comprehension of what it is that Seventh-day Adventists believe, but let's just sum it up by saying that it's quite an anti-Catholic sect. So with that being the context, this makes a little more sense with the story that I'm about to tell. So when I was 14, I had been baptized, I think, the previous year, and it came to my first time receiving what we called communion. And communion in the Seventh-day Adventist Church was received once a quarter. And I think that there's other types of Protestant denominations that do that as well. The Methodists, I believe, are one that they receive communion once every quarter, so 4 times a year. And of course, the Seventh-day Adventists came from this Methodist tradition, or partly from Methodist tradition, because Ellen White, who was the self-professed prophetess of the Adventist Church, was a Methodist herself before joining the Millerite movement. But the whole history of it is probably better left for another story. But anyway, so it came to the first time that I was receiving communion in the Adventist Church, and I was about 14 years old. And usually, generally speaking, only the baptized receive communion as Seventh-day Adventists. Now, maybe that has changed since the mid-90s when I was a teenager and was first baptized. But generally speaking, I think with at least the more traditional Adventists, that would generally be the rule. So it came time to take communion, and we started reciting some kind of creed. And at the time, I had no idea what it was, but I looked to the top of it and saw the words, the Nicene Creed. I probably didn't even know how to pronounce it at that time. But in any case, we went through the Nicene Creed, and, you know, I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, etc., etc., generally the same as it is said in the Catholic Church. But then we came down to a spot that really rattled me, and I found quite problematic, even at 14 years old. And I had just had, I mean, as a child, I was interested in theology and philosophy, but I had a very probably elementary understanding of it. But we came to the part that said, I believe in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting. Amen. So what really stood out there to me at that time, and what shook me, is the part about the Catholic and Apostolic Church. I couldn't believe what we were reciting. Here we were being taught, you know, in these Revelation seminars. So Adventists are well known for their Revelation seminars, which is basically a way in which they recruit potentially new converts to the Adventist Church, is through going through this point-by-point teaching on the book of Revelation, the book of Daniel, and the book of Revelation tied together. And of course, twisting prophecies to suit one of their founders, Ellen G. White, and some of the other Millerite founders' interpretations of the book of Revelation. And one thing that we were taught for sure, without a doubt, was that the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, headed by the Pope in Rome, was the beast of Revelation. And that at some future point, all of Protestantism would join with this harlot church and would form this one world persecuting power headed by the Pope in Rome. So the Catholic Church, needless to say, was a very bad thing. It was a very evil institution. And its entire purpose was to, at least if not today, in the past and in the future, once again, would persecute the Sabbath-keeping Christians through some type of Sunday law that would emerge at some future date. And when that would happen is, or when that came into effect, is subject to debate amongst the Adventists themselves. But regardless, that, needless to say, was very shaking for me to recite this belief in this one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, because we had been taught that the Catholic Church was a persecuting power. So, being inquisitive as I was, I remember talking to my parents about this, and they of course reached out to our pastor, who gave me a bit of an explanation, but it definitely wasn't something that was satisfying. The explanation at that time was, well, this creed is an ancient creed that Christians have been saying for hundreds and hundreds of years, but it's not required by Adventists. At the time he was saying that, you know, there's a debate, or there's talk amongst Adventists as to whether it's necessary to even say this creed before communion. But I didn't find that answer satisfactory, because if it's good enough to read, and it's good enough to state that I believe, or maybe we said it as we believe, I don't quite remember, but in any case, here we are as a church before taking communion saying that I believe in this one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Even as a teenager, I could recognize this fact. So that answer didn't suffice to me. Now, it would be many years later on down the road where I would actually come to the grips of what this meant, but I remember at that time, of course, we didn't have the power of Google at that time, so we didn't have information at the tip of our fingers like we do today. But I do remember trying to dig into this a little bit, and I happened to find a few books. I believe it was from my local library, but I could be wrong. But in any case, I remember finding a couple of books, and maybe I was searching on the internet as well, the very basic internet that we would have had at that time, and reading that, yes, in fact, this creed that we were reading was actually from the Catholic Church, the same Catholic Church. In fact, it was created around the time by which we believe that the church was, the Christian church was hijacked by the Roman Empire, and specifically by Constantine, the emperor, and morphed into what is today Roman Catholicism. So when I looked at it, so we're saying a creed that was a product of something which was created by this persecuting power, by this false harlot religion. And to me, that just made no sense whatsoever. Why am I saying a creed that was created by this false Christian sect, this pseudo-Christian sect, which at some future time and in the past, and even at the time that creed was created, was persecuting the true Christians? And, you know, we even believe that they were slaughtering true Christians and had done lots of damage throughout the Christian world. So why is it that we're saying their creed? And as I also had learned from an elementary understanding at that time, as I had learned, when these people wrote that creed, the people that wrote this Nicene Creed, they were all they were bishops, they were priests of this Catholic Church, and it came from a council which we don't believe in the authority of these ecumenical councils. Now, I probably didn't express it that way at the time, but nonetheless, I could see the contradiction we had between reciting this creed and the origins of the creed itself. I may have shared this story before, but I think it was a while ago, and obviously I've had a lot of new subscribers since last year or early last year. So I did want to share that with you, and just, I found it interesting. It's something that I look back and I sort of chuckle at now, because, you know, at the time it seemed like such a contradiction. And lo and behold, even as a teenager, I recognized that contradiction. Thanks for watching. I look forward to doing maybe a few more of these videos explaining where I came from and what my background was and what led me to becoming a Catholic. And that's all for now.